Okay, in this video, I'm just going to talk a little bit about different types of graphs that you might see. Okay, so we're going to just talk about different types of elasticity you might see in certain graphs. Okay, so let's suppose this is our demand curve. So the first type of demand we have is elastic demand. And elastic demand is when the absolute value, so when we take off the negative sign, the absolute value of the elasticity is going to be greater than 1. So what that means is if you have a 1% change in price, then the change in quantity is bigger than that, okay? Bigger than 1%. So let's suppose we go from P1 here to, let's say, P2 here, okay? And then let's suppose I tell you, I'm not gonna label any specific numbers here. Well, and not on that part. So let's suppose this is like a 30% fall in the price, and this is a 150% increase in the quantity. Okay, so again, you can see that's elastic, right? So there's a big increase in quantity and for a much smaller increase in price. Now, the most extreme case of this is something called perfectly elastic. So perfectly elastic is where any tiny change of, so this is, we can also say it's infinite. So any tiny change would lead to a total change of the quantity. So basically, the demand is perfectly elastic, means they only want to pay that price. Okay, they will not, under any circumstances, pay a higher price than that. That's called perfectly elastic. So perfectly elastic demand, they want to only pay that price. They're of course they're always willing to pay less than this, but they're not willing to pay more. So they won't, under any circumstances, pay more. Now, this is not totally realistic, but it's always good to set the two extremes of something, so then you can kind of compare relative to that. Okay, so these are both elastic. So elastic, the change in quantity is relatively large in percentage terms compared to the change in price. Okay, so the opposite case, inelastic. So inelastic is when, if you take the absolute value, get rid of the negative sign, then our elasticity of demand is less than 1. Okay, so for this inelastic case, let's draw a regular example, and then we'll draw the extreme case. And the extreme case is the most important one in this particular one. So let's sort of like our demand is something like this in some area, and so here's our P1. Okay, and then so this is how much our quantity changes. So let's suppose our price falls by, let's say, 30% in this case, but our quantity only increased by 10%. Okay, so then that would be an example of inelastic, because the fall in price is much bigger than the increase in quantity. Therefore, it's inelastic. The most extreme case, and this is actually a case that's, and we use it quite a bit in examples. It's not exactly realistic, but the most extreme case is this one. If this is our demand curve, so if that's your demand curve, well, that means when the price is, let's say, 50, they buy this much, and when the price is 80, they buy the same. Okay, so this type of demand curve is called perfectly inelastic, and this elasticity is 0. Okay, so the elasticity in this case is 0. They don't change how much they want to buy. Now, this is probably not realistic, something will be perfectly inelastic, but there are things that will be quite inelastic in their demand. One of them is demand for like heart surgery. Okay, so in that case, because you can also think about this when the price falls. If heart surgery gets really cheap, you're not going to run out there and just get a heart surgery for no reason, right? So it's something you're pretty much only going to get it if you really need it. And if it gets more expensive, people will pretty much be willing to pay because it's life-saving treatment, right? So it may not be perfectly inelastic, but it'll be quite inelastic. So inelastic means you're not sensitive to the price. When the price changes a lot, you don't change your behavior much. Now, in the case of the price going down, you don't run out and buy like crazy, but also in the case of the price going up, you also don't reduce very much, and that's inelastic. And then perfectly inelastic is the extreme case of that. Okay. The last one, we can also have something to be unit elastic. So unit elastic is just like this. Something can be unit elastic. Unit elastic is, well, the absolute value of demand of our elasticity of demand is just 1. Okay, so that tells you when you have a 1% change in the price, you get a 1% change in the quantity. Okay, and so in a graph, again, I'm not using particular numbers here necessarily, but in a graph, it's going to be like this. Okay, so if the price was to fall, let's say 33%, then this also rises 33%. Okay, so then the elasticity is just going to be 1. That once we take the absolute value of this will just be 1. So these are our three different types. One thing, so in the next video, I'll come back and talk about the relationship, how elasticity is different than slope, and we'll also talk about the relationship between elasticity and revenue.